See it. It's good.
Perfect. Welcome to the GameDay716 podcast. Todd and Noah are on a hiatus for today. It is me and CJ hosting things. I just took CJ's thunder. I was going to let him intro himself. We got a good show for you guys today. As always, I am one half of the dynamic duo. We've got some interesting topics to talk about today. Probably starting with a little bit of NHL news about Jack Eichel. We'll go into a little bit of the Blue Jays experience that CJ had recently. We'll also touch on the Mayweather-Logan Paul fight, and then we'll go into some football/Bills related topics. Let's start with this. How's it going, CJ? How's your week been?
Great. It's been warm, but getting through it.
Yeah, it was really muggy out the last couple of days for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sunny Buffalo.
Yeah, I love it though. This is my favorite kind of weather, minus the humidity.
Yeah. It's a little early for all this heat, for the humidity at least, but
yeah. Awesome. So tell us about, you went to a Blue Jays game recently. Have you ever been to a Bison's game? I'm sure you have.
Yeah. A lot.
Tell us
a few times when I was little.
Tell us a little bit about how the experiences was at Salem Field with a Major League Baseball game, like how different it was, maybe what things you noticed.
As far as comparing it to like a normal MLB field, I was in Baltimore. I went to the Orioles game before, and when I tell you I was at the Orioles game, like where I was, like it wasn't like you could really even see the players. I was really high up. Didn't have a real good view, couldn't really pick out numbers, couldn't pick out players, nothing like that. But the Bison Stadium is very different because the way the field is set up, nobody is really too far away, right? So they're not expecting MLB fans, right, in that stadium. They're expecting AAA fans. So they're thinking, okay, they don't have the space of an MLB stadium. So every person that has a seat has a way better seat than one half of a regular MLB stadium. So in my mind, like every person is going to get a better view of the team, a better view of players, a better idea of what's going on. When you're closer, you're more into the game. You can, you just feel the energy. And then, so that was a big thing to me about being in Bison Stadium, was just how close you are to the field compared to other MLB stadiums, right? So that, and then it was interesting, just the fan base that was there was a lot of, just seemed like a Bills game, to be honest with you. Like, every stoppage was, let's go Buffalo, or whatever. They're just doing every like, Bills like cheer that of, like, was going on while this Toronto game was playing. And it didn't feel like there was a lot of Toronto people there. It just felt like a lot of Buffalo people who obviously love Toronto, love baseball, whatever. And they really got to, experience something special to be downtown Buffalo to watch a game like that. I think was just surreal. And then That's amazing. Game I went to, Vladdy hit I want to say it was a 3-run homer at one point. And so watching that was pretty surreal,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, so that was a great time. But yeah, the atmosphere was great. I met a couple guys that were a little bit of, what's the best word to put it? Little inebriated, I guess. So like they act a little bit.
Good word.
You know what I mean? And so they act a little bit funny. But you're going to deal with that at any sporting event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to me, it was 2 guys out of a couple thousand. So it's not that big of a deal. Like the guy took a baseball from a kid, which is, rule number 1, you don't do that at a game. You know what I mean? Like if the kid, you give it to a kid that's next to you, whatever. But he refused, and I'm like.
Yeah. So I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that what they did for entry into the stadium was that if you were vaccinated, you were in one section, you could sit shoulder to shoulder with people. If you were unvaccinated, social distancing, other half. Is that pretty much how it went?
Yeah. It seemed like, to be honest, it seemed like vaccinated people got better seats. I don't know if that's an intentional thing, but from what I viewed, everything past third base on the side I was on, and then everything past first base on the other side was non-vaccinated. So that was people that were spread out. Like I said, they're further down the line, whereas everybody between those other two, like between first and third on the fan side, if you can understand what I'm saying, was all very close people, not vaccinated section. So they were very close to each other. And so I don't know if they did that. I don't know if it worked out like that, intentionally or, just how it worked out. But again, it really didn't matter where you were. I mean, obviously being behind like home plate or behind the dugout's cool. Yeah. But where we were, to me, like comparing it to an MLB game where my seats were, if I was in an MLB stadium, would have cost me $200-$300. You know what I mean? Just because of how the proximity to the field, how close you are, you know what I mean?
It felt like a premier seat, but budget pricing.
And most will, right? And most are going to feel that way. As in my opinion, most are going to feel that way compared to an MLB game, right? So if you went to an MLB game, ever been to one, it's packed, it's crazy. Those stadiums go up and up and up and up into three sections. You know what I mean? And when you're getting up there, you're getting far away. It's never that far. It doesn't ever feel that far away in that stadium because it's just such a small stadium.
So acoustically, right, with the stadium kind of being divided between non-vaccinated and vaccinated people, so it wasn't at 100% capacity because
not at all
the unvaccinated people. But did you notice a distinct difference in the decibel levels of fans cheering when you went to an Orioles game compared to when you went to Salem Field to see the Blue Jays?
I mean, I would say that an extra 10 to 20,000 people is going to make a difference. So at that MLB game, you just have so many more people. But for the amount of people that were there, again, I equate it to a Bills game as far as when something big would happen or what, like the sound that you're hearing in your proximity was equivalent to, a heavy Bills game or when people were at a Bills game.
And that seems to have come through in the broadcast as well. You could hear the fans through the broadcasts, which I thought was remarkable and just kind of goes to show what kind of fans we are over here.
Yeah, for sure.
So to kind of segue from that into a nice transition, being that we're seeing a lot of venues, right? The Taste of Buffalo is doing something similar where you either have to show proof of vaccination or a negative test to go to that. It seems like they're really trying to hone in on how they're going to approach events that have a lot of people. And I'd imagine that once we come time for Bills games to start, that we're going to see something similar where we might see one of two things happen in my estimation. And you can correct me if you have a different idea, but I think it's either going to be, you either have to show that you are vaccinated or you have to show that you've tested negative in the last 72 hours, or they'll do kind of what they're doing at Salem Field and a lot of other places where it's like half the stadium is vaccinated people that are literally next to each other in seats. There's no social distancing. And then the other half of the stadium would be unvaccinated people who were socially distanced. And I guess my question for you is, regardless of which way it chooses, do we see that it could potentially cause some issues as far as it could cost some people that are vaccinated the chance to attend a game, being that if the vaccinated section's filled up, despite not filling out the unvaccinated section, there will undoubtedly be a bunch of empty seats on that side. So how about you give us your take on whether or not that particular thing would be fair, how that might be approached. And then if you have different ideas on how they could do it in a more realistic fashion.
So you're saying basically the amount of fans that you're going to lose in the unvaccinated sections are going to affect the game by not having the amount of fans that should be there?
And I'll kind of. So I'll go a step further with it. So we're at, I believe, just around 69%, 69% of adults in New York State that have had at least one of their shots. So you're looking at, I think by the time the season rolls around, you're going to have 70% of New York State adults that are partially or fully vaccinated. So 70% of your fan base is going to have half of the stadium to them and then the 30% will have the other half. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, are we only going to give them 30% of the stadium to socially distance to kind of balance things out?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like 50-50. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, like I for sake of argument, we will have this conversation, but in my opinion, any people in this stadium is better than nothing, right? So like, you know, so like, yeah. And but to your point, I don't know. I mean, could you say, okay, if we're at 70%, we make it 70% the stadium then, and the other 30, give them the 30%.
Yeah, I didn't think about that at all until it came out of my mouth. I was kind of leaning the other two ways, that it would be 50-50, until I kind of remembered that Cuomo came out today and released those numbers. And once we get to 70%, the whole thing
I mean,
is
if those numbers
like
are legitimate, and that's what we're, you know, if those numbers
actually
are legitimate, I wouldn't,
which is shocking. And
right.
Here's a little bit of a disparity. So there was a report that came out today about the Washington football team, and Ron Rivera coming out and saying that just about half of the players are vaccinated at this point.
Yep.
I find it interesting, and I'd imagine that there's probably some correlation between other teams having similar numbers. I can't imagine that the disparity be that vast, but it could be based on state too. But most players aren't from the state they play in, right? Their belief systems are based on a location that may not be where they're currently employed.
Located.
So the fact that about 50% of the Washington football team is vaccinated, yet if we look at New York State as a case study, nearly 70% of adults being vaccinated. I guess I find it interesting that there's such a discrepancy between the level of vaccination among the general public and people that rely on their health and their bodies. Yeah. So it just, I think it begs the question that, like what
information are they getting? And I think him bringing that guy in, like you were just talking about, Rivera, him bringing that, what was
it's a she, by the way. I just learned. I can't remember her name, but I heard on WGR
is she
today.
She's
like she works for the
like she explains what goes on with them basically.
She works at a vaccine institute. Yeah, so she knows how vaccines are created. She knows, what went into this particular one. And Ron Rivera wanted to bring her in to give firsthand knowledge. He went on record saying that he thinks that the players are getting a lot of information from Twitter. And that's both good and bad, because the information can be so widely disparaging.
Well, so I think that goes to the point of like living your life in a bubble, right? So like when you live your life in a bubble, kind of similar to how football players are, right? Where they continue to they'll train, eat, and everything is basically not monitored, but set out for them by the team, right? So most things they do is set up by the team or has some involvement with the team. You know what I mean? So like, how much are they really getting out there and able to have a real conversation with people besides Twitter or besides Facebook, whatever?
That's a good point.
And to me, that has a lot to do with why the information clearly isn't there, or they're not getting it yet, is because the avenues that they're going for, and I'm not saying they're wrong for doing that, because if I was in their position, I'd want to speak to people too. I'd want to have some social interaction, but they really can't, like, because they're not celebrities, but like like they can't walk to Duff's or Anchor Bar and get some wings without there being hundreds of people surrounding them. Maybe smaller guys that aren't as well known, but for the most part, any Bills player that's a starting player or even a rotating guy walks around in the city, you're going to know who he is. Most people are going to know who he is. And so like, they can't really go out. They can't really have these conversations with people. So they have to go to Twitter to have these conversations. And to me, that's where you're creating this misunderstanding of what's really going on and perpetuating it. Right. So it's like, and then one of them tells their buddy, and then their buddy's like, oh, well, this guy is the guy I speak to most. You know what I mean? And it's all within the organization. So they're still not ever going out to speak to anybody else. So it's like they talk to their teammates say this, then they repeat it to another teammate. And it just, to me, that's where you're getting the disconnect between what's going on like in the public and what's going on with organizations, basically.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree with you. It's gonna be interesting to see how this all plays out. I know that this is the last week that players can get vaccinated if they're getting a 2-dose vaccination in order to be fully vaccinated and fully protected by the time training camp rolls around. So I think a lot of things will come into focus over the next couple of days and as we head into next week. But I'll use this as a nice transition to jump sports. And we'll circle back to football in a second. I want to talk about the Floyd Mayweather Logan Paul exhibition fight. Who, in my estimation, Floyd Mayweather toyed with that boy the entire time, and I've been waiting to see that happen because he's thought that he's amazing because he's up until that point. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he was undefeated.
Who's
Logan
that?
Paul. Logan Paul. And I mean,
no,
it didn't count.
He was Owen. He had one fight, and he at one I'll say commissioned fight. Okay, because there's difference between a commissioned fight and an exhibition, right?
Yeah.
And so he had one commissioned fight and he lost it. And that was KSI, I want to say two years ago, maybe. So he's 0-1, right? So, but he made $20 million, okay? And he was an 0-1 boxer. Imagine if you were Canelo Alvarez and you've been doing this for 20 years, 15, 20 years. And you sit there and you see a guy who comes in after 2 or 3 years, 0-1, hasn't even proved himself to the point where he should be fighting the best of the best. 0-1, and then he gets 20 million and you've never ever even come close to that, regardless of pay-per-view. Now, I say that, and then I say, so like imagine how they feel, right? And they're probably annoyed about it, pissed off, whatever. And that's fine. And I understand it. But I'll see a lot of these UFC guys that'll sit there and say, oh, why I should go to boxing, and you know what I mean? I should make money doing boxing. And in theory, you see Logan Paul and you say, okay, I should be able to do that. But the question I have for those guys that sit there and think that they could be switched out with Logan Paul, or they could whatever, and they could box and they'd make the money he's making, I would say to them, do you have the following that he has, that he's worked his ass off for the past 15 years? You know what I'm saying? So it's not like he might not have it in boxing, right? He might not have the following in boxing, might not have the resume in boxing, but he has enough of a fan base that no matter what he does, he's going to get people that want to watch him. And
it's a really good point.
And they'll show that they'll pay. And so, these UFC guys got to take that into account. Like, hey, you're not as big of a draw. And I don't want to be mean to anybody or hurt anybody's feelings, but in reality, you're not as big of a draw as he is. And so, I thought that was interesting. The whole fight to me, while I wanted to see somebody get knocked out, which I obviously you knew kind of wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, I was hoping for it though.
Yeah, and I think his big for Paul or whatever, I think he was very happy that he went 8 rounds with Mayweather and didn't get knocked out. Yeah. And I think that's all he was really going for, and then you look at Mayweather and like I almost think of it like he looked at it like a joke, and he trained 3 days out of the week for this fight. Like now, when you're a real fighter and you're going to say like during like when he fought Pacquiao and Bradley and all these guys, right? Sugar Shane Mosley, those are 7 days week training. 6. Okay. Yeah. So you're running 6 days, and you're getting all the work in you can. Now to say that you only train 3 days a week shows just how serious he took it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it showed, he wasn't his top, Mayweather, but still a 3 days a week Mayweather still put a whooping on him. You know what I mean? Like
a fully prepared Mayweather would have absolutely beat the brakes off of Logan Paul. And I think that the fact that it came off the way that it did. Now I'm not of the camp that thinks that Logan Paul had gotten knocked out at one point by Mayweather. It was late in the fight and they ended up clinching afterwards and he held him up a little bit. But the thing is, when somebody's knocked out, they go dead weight, right? Like ragdoll.
He's not holding him.
And he was wobbly. Don't get me wrong. Like it probably knocked him a little bit senseless, but I don't think he was going down. He might've stumbled, but I don't think it was going to send him to the ground. And I don't think he like held him up to keep things going, at all. One thing I will say to kind of piggyback off of your Logan Paul take is that his fan base, right? The very reach that he has traditionally probably aren't boxing fans. So if
Oh
there's
no,
one thing that I can give him credit for, it's that he's probably bringing some new fans into the sport. People that never
for
would have
sure,
watched
for
boxing
sure.
before. They love Logan Paul because of the videos, and they
Yeah.
have been following his boxing career, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now that they're interested in the sport. So I think
It's
that
not a
it's
bad
had its
thing.
positives and
Yeah.
negatives, but I think that that's definitely one of the bigger positives is bringing in an entirely different demographic that previously wasn't even in tune with the sport at all.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's great for any sport. And I think that anybody within the sport would sit there and say to themselves, okay, well, whether you feel whatever you feel about them, it's helpful. So
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. Next thing I want to talk about is a report that came out about the LA Kings, and they've been rumored to be interested in Jack Eichel. And the current report is that maybe they're not so interested anymore because of the injury, and it's kind of started to create a little bit of a buzz that GMs may be afraid of even touching Eichel with a 10-foot pole because of the injury and the fact that it may mean that he remains a Buffalo Sabre and we see a game of chicken between Jack Eichel and what he wants, the Sabres and what they want. The thing is, because to my knowledge, I'd have to triple check this, but I'm very, very certain, I think, because he was injured on a play during a game. If the injury continues to force him out, it's not like he's not getting paid if the rehab takes even longer. And let's say he's
mm-hmm.
not ready to go for next season. Let's say nobody wants to touch him. He stays a Sabre and he's missing games when we get to next season. And he's still going to get paid for that because of the way that it all went down. So if I'm Eichel at this point, I'm not jeopardizing the entire future of my career for surgery that's never been done on a player that plays the sport that I play.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand him wanting to at least explore the option. It's going to create an interesting offseason for the Sabres,
Yeah.
who have the number one pick.
I mean, the question is this being done as a way to get out? You know what I mean? Like, so like, I'm not saying he doesn't have the issue, right? I believe he has some sort of issue.
Do you think
But
he's
my
making a
thing,
bigger deal of the
I'm saying,
surgery, like
right.
kind of
So
acting like he's more aggravated about that part than he really
yeah,
is?
well, not even that. Well, like, yeah. So basically, so what I'm saying is that, okay, in my mind, if I hated where I was and I knew I wouldn't be able to get out of this contract situation,
Mhm.
okay, I got an injury. How can I use this injury as a as a chess piece in my ultimate goal of getting out, right? And so, okay, well, how would I do that? And then I say to myself, okay, well, I would say I'm going for the most craziest surgery that has been heard of it ever been done to an NHL player. I want that done to me. Now, if
Yeah.
I'm an NFL GM and my top guy comes to me and says that, that might sway me to sit there and think, okay, let's get rid of him. You know what I mean? Like if that's what he wants, let another team deal with it, whatever. And then I worry that once he goes to another team, it won't be that surgery anymore. It'll be something, you
It'll
know what
be
I mean?
something
Like,
else, and he'll go a
yeah,
different route with it and play.
exactly. And that's what
Yeah,
I'm thinking.
it's
Is that the
possible. I can't
pawn? Is
discount it.
that, and that's what worries me. And so, I think, and then I also think about like the Kings in this situation, and that to me is probably smoke being blown. And
It
I
very well could
say
be. It could be to get other teams out of the running. It
get
could have
out
been
teams
something
other
that was
way.
leaked to get
Why not
other
we
GMs from trying to strike a
exactly?
deal.
And what do they want most, right? What's their goal? To get him at the cheapest price possible. How do you
Yeah.
do that? By say you're not interested. If you say
And
you're not interested,
yeah.
you have more leverage at that point. Then you say, okay, well, what are you going to offer me at that point? Not about what I'm going to offer you. I told you I wasn't interested. What
Mhm.
what are you going to get? Like basically, how do I get Eichel and not give the house for him, which is I think what they want. Obviously, they want a good return for him, which I think they should get. I think they deserve to get that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if he forces his way out with this, and then a bunch of teams come saying, "Oh, we're not interested. We're not interested. We're scared off. We're scared off. We're scared off." Mix those two together, and to me, that is a recipe for a awful return on a player investment.
And see, that's my fear with the way that the Buffalo Sabres are currently organized and some of the decisions that have been made over the years. My fear is now that if those are the kinds of things that are being done behind the scenes, would the Sabres say yes to a deal that was under what they valued Jack Eichel as and what they thought the return would be just for the sake of moving him off the team? Like, is it going to get to the point over the next couple of months where they don't feel like they have a choice, and it's either it's going to destroy the locker room or it's going to cause a rift between whomever? Let's just get rid of them and then taking whatever the best offer is. But like you said, this could be a way for GMs to be trying to force down that price. I could tell you from a personal standpoint, if I was in their shoes, if I was a GM in the NHL and I wanted Jack Eichel on my team, knowing that there's probably some ways, I talked to my medical staff, they've got these ideas to get him back to full health. I think that if we brought him in here, we can convince him to do X, Y, or Z, and he would be able to rehab. And maybe we don't have him for the entire season next season, but maybe he's ready to go by the playoff push, or maybe he's ready to go by, mid-season. And I would try to put smoke screens out there. He's injured. Like, everyone in the league knows he's injured, and it's pretty serious. So why not use that to your advantage? So it's a very good point. They very realistically could just be blowing smoke to try to force the price down. And I guess we'll have to see how that plays out, but that's going to be something.
I mean, that's what that screamed to me when I first heard it. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I heard. That's what I thought of when I heard that they were not interested or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sure that like not a lot of them are not interested at the price the Sabres want right now. I'm sure they're not. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But I guarantee you they would be interested at a little bit less, or you know what I mean? Like
one first round pick and a prospect,
whatever they think, you know what I mean? Whatever they view it at, but I'm sure a little bit, some teams are probably like, we'll go a little closer to what the Sabres want. Some teams are probably a little further away from what the Sabres want, and that's fine, but they all, I'm sure, would take it. You know what I mean?
I want the tank years to have been for something, even if it's just Jack didn't pan out. If he doesn't pan out, which it doesn't look like it's going to, I at least want a return on that investment. You're not gonna, no matter what you get in return, I think you'll be hard pressed to match the talent level.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm the Sabres, I'm gonna sit here and say what, like, to boost his value as much as possible. If I'm a Sabres GM, I'm gonna sit here and say, okay, what season has he had that he had a full complement of players around him? They had a winning team. They were good to go. Everything clicked. Everything was like, he has never had that, right? So like in my memory, you know what I mean? Like, we've had good players, you know what I mean? And with teams that should have been good that ended up not being good. But what I'm saying is, like, I would be, if I was the GM, I would be trying to tell people like, hey, he's not there yet. You know what I mean? Like, even though you've seen what you've seen for Buffalo, he hasn't reached where he can be because of our whatever. You know, don't put it on yourself, but just say, we don't think he's we don't think he's reached his potential yet. And that's what I would be stressing as much as possible. He hasn't reached his potential. You put him on a team with the right people around him, and he'll be a stud. And that's what if you want to get rid of him and you want more, that's the narrative I would be pushing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. It's very interesting. That's a very good point. It's a very good point. It's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. It's going to make for an interesting offseason because, I mean, something's got to give at some point. So let's circle back around to football. I mentioned to you before we went live that Kareem Jackson of the Denver Broncos was on Aqib Talib's podcast, and he had mentioned that Deshaun Watson has recently told him in the past couple of weeks that he very badly wants to join the Broncos. His exact quote was, "I got a great relationship with Deshaun. I've been talking to him the last couple of weeks. All he's been telling me is, look, Jack, just tell them that's where I want to be." He's like, that's where I want to be. He's like, I want to be in Denver. And during the time where I was going through my little free agency thing, I ended up signing back here. Before I signed, he called and he was like, man, are you going to sign? He's like, I don't know. I'm not sure yet. And he was like, well, let me know what you're going to do. And I signed back and he was like, listen, tell them I want to be in Denver.
Is that verbatim what he said?
Verbatim.
Okay, because there's a lot of likes in there. So that sounds like something he would say.
That's not my vernacular.
Like
yeah.
So, and he was like, and I was verbatim. Like,
Yeah. That was hard to read. I was powering through it.
Yeah. You did a good job. Flowed.
So I think that it's be interesting. What kind of compensation do you think Deshaun Watson would gain for the Texans? Let's not even assume that he goes to Denver, but I can't imagine that any team will give too much for him with there still being a giant question mark over his head about his legal status.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'd love to say, like, look, if none of this is going on, he's worthy of maybe multiple firsts or a first and a second and some late round picks.
Yeah.
I don't know that he goes for a 1 now. I don't. If I'm an NFL
I could see
GM,
I could see 1-1. I could see 1-1, whatever, a couple threes, whatever. I could see a 1.
If I have multiple 1s in a particular year, like if I have multiple 1s next year, I might consider it. If I've only got a single first round pick, and there's a very realistic possibility that I could trade for this man, he could pass his physical, and then 3 months from now, beginning of the season, some news breaks about all of this, and it goes off the rails fast, and then I'm out a first round pick that literally turned into nothing. Because there's no telling how that would play out if worst case scenario comes to pass. But on the flip side, if I'm a QB needy team, if I'm the Washington football team or the Denver Broncos, is it worth the gamble? Because you've already wasted first round picks in the past.
Yeah.
Countless times. Broncos had Paxton Lynch. That didn't work out.
It's been a joke. Since
it's been a
Manning left, it's been a joke.
I'm honestly not like against Drew Lock, but I don't know that he'll ever be a top 15 quarterback in the league.
Yeah,
I just don't see that as his ceiling. He's a likable guy. Like all indications say that he's a likable guy. I get a riot out of the sideline clips of him rapping in the stadium. Like that's entertaining to me. But entertainment doesn't make you good at what you do necessarily.
Yeah. He's not. From what I watched when I watched games, he's not reading the defenses yet the right way to the point where he can take advantage of that. So he's late on a few, or there's a couple times, like I think the Jets were like up. I remember watching this game. It was Jets Broncos. Jets score first or whatever, and I was like, oh, the Jets are going to pull this game out. And then I think that Denver ended up winning it. But I've seen him a few times throw picks, and he's just clearly not developed. Now, can he? I'm not going to say he can't. You know what I mean? But from what I've watched last year, he has not developed to a point where you can put him in there and say okay, let's put it on his shoulders. Let's say fourth quarter, 2 minutes, give him a ball. Can he go downfield and score? I don't think he can do it against a good team.
He hasn't shown that he can yet.
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's what football is made of. 2 minutes. What can you do? You know what I mean? Like, not saying that that's all of it. There's a lot more. Some teams can win, can just ride you the whole game, and they'll dominate. But for the games that are close, when you got good teams playing good teams, that 2 minutes has a lot to do with the outcome of the game. And you've seen it more recently in Bills games. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, the Cardinals game comes to mind. I know how
Patriots
it ended.
Game,
that notwithstanding,
but still,
the Patriots
game went in our favor, right? So they're not all bad. And I've seen Allen. I just had to sit there and be like, damn, he is good. You know what I mean? But I've seen Allen do things in less time than I thought he could. So I'm like, okay, well, he's got a little bit, and then he'll do it in 15 seconds. And I'll be like, oh, well, you had a whole minute and a half there. Why'd you do it? What, I'm happy with it. It's surprising. And that's what you want out of a quarterback. You don't want to be surprised in a bad way. You want to be surprised in a good way. And that's what it's been with Allen so far. So we've been lucky. But as far as the Broncos, they brought in Bridgewater. They got Locke there. Is
there room?
Is there room?
Somebody's got to go.
Can you give two of, I would say, okay, take Locke, take Bridgewater, and then take a second.
Give him one of the two.
Yeah.
I think that they would. This sounds ridiculous because he just signed this off season. It's not. I would get rid of Teddy Bridgewater before I got rid of Drew Lock. You know what you have in Teddy Bridgewater. You don't know if maybe this is the off season that it all comes together for Drew Lock. And I hate to say this because I feel like this is going to be a thing forever now. It's going to be something we hear. someone eventually, just statistically speaking, is going to make that Josh Allen type of leap. And up until now, nobody ever has, right? Like he's a one of one player, a one of one success story of how you could take this mangled ball of clay that's so raw and then just put the right pieces around him, give him continuity, give him consistency, put playmakers around him, build the team around his strengths, and then just have faith in the process, as cliche as it sounds. I don't think that teams are going to be able to as easily discount a quarterback and say that he's going to be a bust. It's not going to work. He's already done it for 2 years. He's not showing us anything. Because I think it's going to give GMs hesitation now. They're like, what if we get rid of this guy? He goes to another team. He's in the right situation, and he becomes a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah,
because I think that Josh Allen changed the narrative for how we allow talent to flourish and how they can grow into what their ceiling is. I think that the Bills and how they went about things with Josh Allen is a blueprint that I think people are going to around the league try to replicate. I don't know that it can be for a lot of reasons. I think there was a lot of variables that are the cause for Josh Allen's success, but I think it's kind of going to change the whole, it's been a year and 3 games. He's not going to work. Let's just plug in the other guy. I don't think I think we're going to see some teams hesitant to do that and to give up on players until maybe the 3rd year. Maybe Josh Allen creates this dynamic where they give prominent players 3 different years, 3 seasons. If after 3 seasons it's not there, or if it's super apparent, like it didn't take 3 seasons to see Peterman wasn't the guy. You know what I mean? Like that's the other side of the spectrum.
Didn't take 3 quarters.
It literally didn't even take a half. The Baltimore game, he lasted a quarter and a half.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just if they move Deshaun Watson to Denver, I think that you have to have Denver next season has 1 pick in each round. So they have a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. Just 1 in each round. I think, like you said, maybe a 2nd round pick and Teddy Bridgewater, or a 2nd round pick, or if you really wanted to, Drew Lock. It's going to be, again, interesting. I don't know if as an NFL GM, if I would make a move for Deshaun Watson, knowing that like there's just way too many question marks still. And it's a substantial commitment because you're not only just taking on the fact that you're going to lose draft assets, but then you're going to be on the hook for a salary. Now there's some verbiage that I'm sure exists that can get whatever team Deshaun Watson is on out of it. If like his court problems and all of this just goes completely off the rails and he gets put on the exempt list indefinitely, and who knows how it could play out. If I'm an NFL GM, I'm not giving up at first. I don't think I'm giving up at first.
Yeah, I agree. I hear you.
So speaking of Josh Allen and the Bills, I want to touch on the fact that we've had one. I want to give props to all the players that went against what the NFLPA has been preaching. They wanted a lot of people to not go to voluntary OTAs, and a lot of teams didn't have full turnouts. I think we've got a pretty good contingent of players that showed up, but there's some notable names that have been missing that get under my skin a little bit, because I think that they owe it to the team and to the new guys at the position group to be there. And that's guys like Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison. Now, don't get me wrong. They are vets. Do they need OTAs? Probably not. But this isn't about them, right? If you have Super Bowl aspirations and everyone else is putting in that grind, now they're probably training on their own, and that's fine. I'm glad that they're doing that. But I think that it's doing a disservice to the position group not to be bringing along guys like Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham by not having your top edge rushers at OTAs to kind of take these guys under their wing. So I'm a little bit perturbed by it. I wish that they would show up. Next week is mandatory minicamp, so that's probably going to change and they'll be there. But that's 3 weeks of OTAs that the young guys didn't have veteran leadership in their position rooms. Get that guidance. And I don't get me wrong, we're still ahead of where we probably were last year because of how restricted everything was with COVID last year. But what's your take on 3 of our 4 defensive line starters? Star Latule, Mario Addison, Jerry Hughes, all non-participants in
Yeah. I mean, I know you haven't gotten to it yet, but my question would be, how much of this, like them not being there, has had an impact on the Epinesa Feliciano situation, right? So if those
Yeah.
leaders, those veteran leaders, aren't there to tell Epinesa, yo, chill out, dude, right?
Yeah, like just
Does it get to a
relax.
point where guys are throwing punches and then again? Now, I don't think once or twice, like a punch thrown here and there, is going to hurt anything or like kill the chemistry of the team so badly that, but it just, you don't want things to lead to it. You need the veteran leadership to avoid things like that, basically. And I think that is a perfect example of what happens when they don't show up.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't know that it goes down the same way if the veterans in that position group are there.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna kind of segue. You kind of combine the two things perfectly, so we'll have both discussions at the same time because they kind of intertwine.
Yeah.
Out of everyone in the defensive line room, AJ Epinesa is probably the last guy I thought would get into a fight. He seems so like such a low key guy,
Yeah.
but I like the fact that he's showing a nasty streak. He pulled a Josh Allen and tossed the ball at Feliciano. Like, think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. I want him to have a chip on his shoulder this year.
Yeah. That anger was lacking last year.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I would say that, like, you know, you have to be
He's
an
a good
angry
kid.
person. Right. But you could see on the field that there wasn't much of a like
the
anger.
nasty streak.
Yes.
Like, I'm just gonna,
Yep.
If you're gonna block me, I'm gonna just go through you and I'm gonna push you into the quarterback if I have to.
Yep.
I'm just gonna like go Hulk mode.
And when I think of like nasty too, like when I think, because I played D-line also, right? So like when I think of a nasty D lineman, I think of a guy with hands of like steel that could just like, you know, a guy puts his hands on you.
Yep. Pop him in the chest
you know
one time.
Or, knock his hands down, whatever, you know. A lot of these guys got these moves. If you ever watched them in slow motion, where their hands are like a lot to do with how they get around quarterbacks. Some guys are fast enough that they can just get around a edge guy, a lineman, but some guys, they have to use their hands to get around guys, and I would like to see him have that. Just, you know, beat down somebody's arm from trying to block him, and just fight to get to the quarterback. You know what I mean? And
100%. And I think Deion Dawkins probably put it best that he goes up against AJ Epinesa one-on-one in OTAs, and he has been.
Yeah.
And I guess during some of the one-on-one drills, he can notice some strength behind AJ that wasn't there last year.
That's
and to hear some players talking him up, Leslie Frazier has talked him up. It seems like he's on the cusp of maybe making a pretty substantial step forward. I think bulking up and putting on some muscle.
I was going to say he was a little small when he came out, right? Like, I felt like for his position, he wasn't known as a bigger guy. He was known as a smaller for that position, I thought.
Yeah. And
so
I'm gonna circle back to Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes. Mario Addison isn't going anywhere. I'm not even gonna say it's a worry, because it's really not a worry. If I was Jerry Hughes and I know that I don't really have a dead cap, right? Like, they could release me and they could free up cap space by releasing me. I don't think the Bills would. I think they see him as like, hey, let's let him ride it out here. I don't see the McBean regime doing something like that to a player that's been there since the beginning, before the beginning.
Yeah, before the beginning, exactly.
But if I'm Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, and I know that there's 3 first and second year guys in total, AJ Epinesa, Greg Rousseau, Boogie Basham, those 3 guys, if any one of them elevate their game, you lost your spot for the season.
For sure.
Like,
for sure.
One of them at some point have to jump into that role and be the primary edge rusher opposite whoever the odd man out between Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes is.
Right.
I'll tell you this about watching Jerry Hughes film last season. I think he's still better. I think he's currently better than Mario Addison, just based on what we saw in film last season.
Yep.
So even though there'd be dead cap with Mario Addison at this point, and it wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't have any cap savings. So there's no chance he goes anywhere, in my opinion, unless it's a trade. Yeah. Maybe if it's a trade and they can get like a 4th or a 5th round pick.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think the presence, regardless, I think he'll stay. Remember, like you said, he's been there since before the beginning, and
yeah,
it seems to me that the way that McDermott and Bean operate is very, very loyalty driven. So,
yeah.
those guys
That's
came
why
with him.
Milano came back.
That's what I'm saying. These guys, the guys that came from Carolina to play with McDermott clearly had loyalty to him. So
Yeah,
I don't see him returning that loyalty and saying, "Oh, here 2 weeks before season starts, you cut you." You know what I mean? Like I think that if they were going to cut him, they'd have cut him already. And
yeah,
if they didn't, because you got to give guys, regardless, especially that situation, you got to give guys a chance to find another place to land, right? And if they're
yeah.
not, and so it kind of causes. I've seen situations where, I'm sorry, I'm charging this iPad right now.
You're good.
I've seen situations where guys will get let go maybe 2 weeks before the season, and it leaves such a bad taste in the player's mouth.
Yeah,
And so I don't want to see that happen specifically, and I don't think it will,
I don't
just
think it will
because
either.
of the relationship that they have. And
Mhm.
so, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I hope one of those three guys that you named, either Basham,
Rousseau, Epinesa.
Rousseau, yes, one of those three. I'm hoping one of them steps up, makes the decision. Okay, we make a decision next year. What I mean? I hope they force
Yeah,
the
I hope it makes
decision
it
to
an
be made.
easy thing to do. Like
Yes,
they
yes,
they.
yes.
All right, the end is locked down. We're good. We're good there. I'd love to see two guys. I keep hearing Boogie Basham brought up a lot, and I guess he's impressing a lot of people. I thought that it was going to be Greg Rousseau that kind of separated himself, but
Yeah.
it seems like Epinesa, at least currently, and Greg Rousseau is raw compared to Epinesa and Boogie Basham just because of his limited playing time
Mm-hmm.
over the years, and he's still getting acclimated to everything, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's definitely has the highest potential ceiling out of the three. At least it would seem that way. But I think that we're either going to see it be AJ Epinesa or Boogie Basham. That is the one that makes it so difficult on the coaches that at some point that player is starting on the D line, and the other guys
Yeah.
will still be in the rotation. But I
Yeah.
could easily see one of these young guys jumping in and it being like Jerry Hughes and AJ Epinesa to start a game, and then the
Yeah.
rotation goes from there.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's what we need.
I see two different things playing out. It's either going to be one of them takes over prior to start of the season, and you will see them playing majority of the snaps when you start, and all the other guys will, fit in a couple, well, I don't know, 20 snaps maybe, if that, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I so I think a guy will come out. It's either guy's gonna come out, take the spot, the other guys will rotate, or somebody is going to need game situations to playing in games to acclimate, and then by the end of the season you're in that situation. You know what I mean? So either way, I think either the beginning of the season or it'll take a little bit of time through the season, but I think one of them will step up. One of those two, I see one of those two situations playing out. Either by the end of the year we have a solid understanding of who's where and what we're doing going forward, or honestly, I could see it even happening earlier in the season where one of those guys takes off, you know what I mean, and gets ahead
Yeah.
of the other one.
So I just pulled up the snap counts for the entire defensive line for last season. And here is something we might find a little interesting. So the leading defensive tackles last year were Ed Oliver and Quentin Jefferson. And then there's a little bit of a drop off when you get to Vernon Butler, Harrison Phillips, Justin Zimmer, etc. Star obviously had 0. DNs it played out kind of exactly how you would imagine that it did. Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison were pretty neck and neck with snap counts. And then everyone else pretty much got half of that.
Okay.
With AJ Epinesa and Daryl Johnson coming in just under 300, those guys had over 600.
So
snaps.
300 divided by 16. What is that?
You mean like an average?
Yeah, like how much average are those rotational guys getting in snaps per game?
And we also can't forget that this season we're going to have 17 games. So it might
Yeah,
not
that
be
too.
a complete apples to apples comparison, but over a 16 game season, like for example, AJ Epinesa 291 snaps over the course of the season puts him a little bit over 18 snaps per game.
So that's what I said. 20 snaps, but for the rotational guys.
Yeah,
That's about right. Okay, that's what I
Yep.
was. I was like, is that number good? Because I was thinking like,
so
but
it
that's
would
good.
seem to me like McDermott and Frazier like to run a defense where you have your two starting DNs having about twice as many snaps as your rotational guys. They all rotate, right? But you have two guys that are clearly at the forefront of snap counts. So to kind of go back to what we were saying, if one of those three guys can elevate their game, I could see them taking over that lion's share of snap counts for one of those two, be it Jerry Hughes or Mario Addison. And in my opinion, I would want it to be Mario Addison just because I think that Jerry Hughes has more left in his tank in comparison. It's not to put anything, it's not nothing against Mario Addison.
No, but I don't think anybody overtakes Hughes this year, right? Now, Addison, I could see that happening, but
I think Addison's gone after the season, no matter how it goes. Like, I hope that they make a run at the Super Bowl and he can get a ring with the squad and feel like he was a part of kind of changing the narrative of this organization. Yeah. But I would really like to see Jerry here at least one more year after this, just as a veteran presence in that locker room, especially in that position group with DNs. Like I want him to still be amongst our edge rushers, even if he takes a back seat and then we see two of the young guys starting, and then he's only getting 250, 300 snaps a season.
Yeah, easily.
Because at some point his tank's going to run on empty, but I think he's still got minimum 2 seasons left in him.
Yeah, for sure. I remember last year during, like, I think it was the playoff run, or no, it was right before the Monday night Patriots game. Had to be December, if not January, that game was. But anyways, I was down in Florida. I had my Bills stuff on. I was going hard, you know what I mean? And I saw a family with like Patriots stuff on, And now usually the dynamic is, right, that he's got Patriots stuff on, I got Bills stuff on. And the dynamic usually is, maybe next year for you Bills. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like usually when you see a Patriots person, it's like, you show respect, you know what I mean? Because you show, okay, your team has been the pinnacle of success for the past 15 years. You got to show respect to that. And at least, you just say, okay, you guys are better, whatever. And now again, when I saw this guy, that wasn't the back and forth, that it was more praise for what the Bills have done, you know what I mean? As opposed to what the Patriots were doing at that point. And you see the guard kind of shift and people start to realize, hey, they're not a joke or a laughing stock of the league anymore. And there's somebody that you need to respect. And that's exactly what I got from this guy was just, hey, you guys are really doing it this year. And you know what I mean? And that's great to feel that. And just, I say that just because, like you said, if he wants to go for the Super Bowl, I hope they get it for him. Like you said, I hope he feels like he's helped change the narrative of Buffalo football, Buffalo sports. And that's huge. And so I hope he feels that way. And I hope he wants that too. You know what I mean? And so it's got to be nice to start from the bottom, right? And see something come to fruition. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's a different feeling than coming in late and riding a wave. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So speaking of that, I'm going to equate that to being an underdog. And recently, Brian Dable came out and said that all indications are that Josh Allen still feels like and will always feel like the underdog, regardless of the success he has.
Yeah.
And I am really starting to believe that even if he were to do something unfathomable, like go to 4 straight and win 4 straight, that following season, he's going to hit training camp and he's still going to feel like the underdog because that kid was told no by every college in this country.
Yep. Yep.
Teams passed on him. Everybody's been mocking him. He has the season he has last season. Now the narrative is going to be, well, is he going to regress? Was it just a fluke? People that know football, people that like truly understand and aren't just armchair quarterbacks, and the fandom of another team is giving them some bias. I don't see any way that he regresses. He might take a small step back yardage wise, but I don't even see that happening. Not in a 17 game season, and not with the addition of Emmanuel Sanders in the mix.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I don't see that happening either.
So I love that the leader of this team will forever feel like an underdog because the city of Buffalo embraces that, and we always have.
Yeah.
And the fact that we have a quarterback that even if he sees success, he's still going to know that he's the underdog, right? Because everybody doubted you this whole time. And now you finally prove them wrong and they want to jump on the wagon. It's like, no. I want you to still treat me like I'm the underdog. Come up with some narrative that'll make it sound like, well, everybody in the AFC East got marketably better. And okay, great. I still don't. It's the Bills division to lose.
We're still the threshold. So until you pass us, good luck.
Yeah. And I don't see any of those teams. Will it be a more competitive division? Possibly. I don't think Miami finishes where they finished last season though. Because they don't have Fitzmagic to pull 3 wins out of his butt.
Yeah, I don't see that either.
So it's going to be Tua, and Tua barely did anything last year. In 10 games, he had just over 1,800 yards.
Yeah.
Like you're averaging 181 yards a game. Like I don't know how you make a huge jump from that, but I mean, we'll definitely see. I did want to talk about tight end a little bit. In the event that we don't get Zach Ertz. So I'm looking at the snap counts from last season, and we got to remember that Tommy Sweeney's back in the mix, and from the clips that I've seen, he's looking pretty good. Yeah, he looks like he hasn't missed a beat at all. But here is the snap counts for our tight ends last season: 487 snaps for Dawson Knox. Tyler Kroft got 298. Lee Smith got 171. So I think Lee Smith snaps probably go to Sweeney. They probably won't use Sweeney the same way that they use Lee Smith. They kind of use Lee Smith as an extra blocker. But without Ertz, do you think that our tight end room can be more productive than it was last season? Or do you think that the addition of someone like Zach Ertz is necessary for that position group to take the next step?
I know that like we had this conversation about Ertz, I think last episode, and I was high on getting him, and I felt like he would help the position group. But without him, if say like that doesn't happen and we're in the same boat, right?
Yeah, the hypothetical that it's just the guys we have.
Yeah, I believe in Knox, and I'm not of the understanding that we need to get rid of him. I'm not of the understanding that what I mean. Like I think that bumps and bruises come along with the tight end position, and you're gonna have games where you didn't play as well as you wanted to, or you're gonna have a few games where and I think overall though, I see a tight end that can get open. I see a guy that has the athleticism to make a move after catching the ball and still get extra yards, which is of the great tight ends that are around even today, that's a huge staple, extra yards, right? So if, you get a guy 10 yards, look at Kelsey, you know what I mean? He's always moving the chains. He's always getting that hard 5 yards to move the chain, to do what he can, you know what I mean? And I see Knox as getting there. I really do. I don't think he's a bust. I don't think he's not worth keeping. I truly believe that, give him time, let him relax a little bit, let him get more comfortable.
Yeah.
Let him get
more comfortable sounds right.
Okay. Let him get more comfortable within the system, and then then see what he does. But I truly believe that there's nowhere to go but up with him.
I think he's done all the right things in the offseason. I know since the last episode, it's come out about some of the things that he's been doing as far as hand-eye coordination and working with some guy 5 days a week. And I know he's worked with Josh a bit, and it seems like he knows what the issue is. It seems like he's self-aware enough to identify, and that's something that he didn't do last offseason, right? Like he just built on the momentum from his rookie
Mm-hmm.
season, went through the process of training camp, but this offseason feels different for him. It feels like he did Josh Allen-esque type of soul searching about like, what is it that I have to do to be a better football player so that I can maximize my potential and help this team win not just one championship, but multiple. Because Stephon Diggs wants 5, and I'm here for it. But I think that Dawson Knox is gonna take a little bit of a leap, and I'm now leaning when we talked last episode about this. I was leaning towards they may bring. I don't want them to bring in Ertz, but that's probably why they freed up some space with Diggs restructure. I'm starting to hear rumblings that the Josh Allen contract might be coming. And this was designed to be able to load up the contract appropriately to be able to fit it under the cap for this season.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you would do in essence is, if I would imagine this is what the Bills are going to do with Josh Allen, right? He's got 2 more years left on his contract because they've picked up the 5th year option. This is year 4 that we're coming up to now. Then they got the 5th year option. So they got 2 more years of Josh Allen before a new contract would kick in. So you could give him an extension, right? And then give him a massive signing bonus, not too substantial, but big enough to be able to kind of mitigate some of those cap hits without adding too much to this season's cap number. And you gave yourself enough room with that Diggs restructure to be able to squeeze that in. And then you do Edmonds next season if he has a good season this year. And if not, you let him go into his 5th year as his prove it year. I think they're more likely to kick the Edmonds can down the road for another season than they are the Josh Allen can, because Josh Allen isn't going to get any cheaper.
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't have the season he had last year, the market itself will dictate that he'll be more expensive, because some other quarterback will get paid and it'll raise the bar. So if you can, you might as well get it over with. You might as well pull the Band-Aid off, get him the contract.
It's always been shown throughout history that teams that gamble against quarterbacks usually end up losing. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the Dak Prescott situation,
perfect.
And example. In that situation, I've always felt like they wanted him to fail. Not like they went out every season and was like, oh, I hope he fails. But at the same time, they didn't pay him when they should have paid him. And to me, you only don't do that if you have a question about where he's going to be in the future.
Yes. So is he going to be here for 10 years?
Right. So if in your mind, right, if you're Jerry Jones and in your mind you say, I think he will regress, and I think that what he thinks he should deserve now will be less than what he deserves next year, or what he should deserve next year. And you gambled on that and you lost. Right. Yeah. And now you can make it out like you guys were great friends and everything was great when he got paid. But in reality, you didn't want to pay him that 2 years ago. And if you'd have paid him it 2 years ago, you'd have paid him less. You'd have had less of an issue, and, you would have had less internal problems. You'd have had him paid, and he point blank, he'd have cost you less money, because again, it's raised every year. So it's like, in my opinion, not paying these guys now is always a stupid move, because it doesn't seem like in the NFL, once you get something, it doesn't seem like you lose it very often. Like I have a hard time remembering, outside of maybe like Matt Castle, who had a guy who had a great season and then like just tanked for the next 10 years, quarterback wise. You know what I mean? A guy who really came out. I guess Lamar could be an argument, kind of, but I don't think that anybody views last season of Lamar as what you should expect moving forward. I think last season Lamar was kind of your lowest. And
I think we saw the Lamar Jackson floor last season.
Exactly. And so I'm just saying that, like, when you see a guy pop like Allen popped, you don't usually see that go down. And even if it goes down a little bit, you're still not going to pay him less money. You know what I mean? You're still not going to be, there's not going to be any situation where you don't pay him now. And either if he's still on the team, right? So if you're talking about getting rid of him, that's a totally different situation. But there's not going to be any situation where you don't pay him now and next year you're going to pay him less. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, even if even if he regresses, I'm not sure if everyone is aware of this, but prior to getting hurt last season, Dak Prescott. Speaking of which, I want to circle back to Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott,
Yeah.
he was on pace for like 6,000 yards.
Oh no, it was incredible. I had him in
It was
fantasy. I was upset when he died.
insanity.
When
So
he
just
died.
to put it into context, his first 3 seasons, he threw for 3,600 yards, 3,300 yards, 3,800 yards. Played in all 16 games. He has not missed a game until the 2020 season.
And what is the rushing
When
stats?
rushing stats, we are.
I'd say about 500 yards, 400 yards.
I'll pull that up in a second, but just to give you a comparison of what he was doing. So in 5 games in 2020, he threw for half the yards he threw for in any of the first 3 seasons. So he was on pace to have a 50% increase over his first 3 years in the league. And to me, that's incredible. Like that's just beyond incredible.
Yeah.
I just
I agree.
mind-boggling. And if the Dallas Cowboys wouldn't have paid him, even in limited action, only playing in 5 games, he still would be a top 5 paid quarterback in the league because somebody else would have gave him that contract. Maybe not quite that, but close to it. They would have overpaid, like they would have paid through the teeth for Dak Prescott had he become available because the Cowboys didn't sign him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's just,
oh yeah.
And that just goes to show that, like, even
and I think at a point that's what he wanted too.
Yeah, he gambled on himself, and it's not often in this league we see a player kind of put all their chips in the middle of the table and say, "Nah, I am that dude, and I'm going to prove it again and again and again and again, and come out the other side." Like the Dak Prescott situation, signing for that kind of deal, I don't recall any other time in my lifetime that a team has given a guy top money after only playing in a few games in a season in which he missed 2/3 of the season due to injury. Like it's so unprecedented. And I think it's just a testament to, the mentality of, hey, I know that I'm greatness personified. And if I have to show it over and over and over and over again to you, I will. And now you're giving me more of a reason because now I'm just going to do it to spite you because you didn't think I could do it.
And that's what it seems like.
That's going to give me a perfect segue back into Josh Allen. Josh Allen has that to him, more so than Dak Prescott, in my opinion, because of the Josh Allen story. It's just he has constantly been told no. And Jordan Palmer was probably the one who said it best. Every voice outside of his own has been telling him no, 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 no for his entire career. But he keeps telling himself that, yeah, no, I am that dude. I am going to get better. I am going to look at myself and fix the things that I need to fix. And I think that that's a really good example, not just for his teammates, but for players around the league. And then also for all the kids around the world. My son recently, he's in flag football, playing football for the first time. And that's how I want him to be, right? Like I want him to have that mindset that every day is another chance to improve and keep the mindset, cliche as it sounds, just that growth mindset that every day I'm going to approach it where I know I can get a little bit better today. And I want him to have that chip on his shoulder. Like I want him to have this Josh Allen-esque demeanor to him where it's like, I don't care how many people tell me I'm too small or I'm not strong enough or I'm not big enough or I'm not fast enough or whatever the case may be. I'm going to shatter through that glass ceiling and I'm going to achieve whatever it is I want. And I think players like Josh Allen are the perfect personification of what it means to have so much confidence in yourself that you don't cross the point of cockiness because of how self-aware you are. Because you know that you could still improve, to know that you're great, but that you haven't even reached your potential yet. And I think that's huge. And I think that that's what we should strive to want out of our role models, especially for the younger generation. And I think people like Dak Prescott and Josh Allen are the shining example of that. Did I lose you, CJ? I might have lost CJ. Okay, so I am going to give a couple final thoughts. We lost CJ right at the end. So I will end with this. The sports world is a crazy place. We all use it as a way to escape, as a form of entertainment, as a distraction from all the things going on in the world. Be kind to each other, though. We don't have to believe the same things to have mutual respect for one another. I think that locker rooms show us that that's possible in these microcosms of society, right? That's what locker rooms are. It's like a small subsection of what society looks like, all intermingled from people from all different walks of life. I don't care if it's football, I don't care if it's hockey, basketball, baseball, whatever. Locker rooms are some of the most unique places on this planet because you have people from every walk of life that find a common goal, have differences, have different beliefs, come from different places, think different things, but come together as one to achieve something greater than an individual can achieve. So, next time you're in an argument with somebody over a political viewpoint or a belief that you have that somebody else doesn't hold, whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're young or you're old, embrace the differences between us. Let our sports heroes be an example of how we can intermingle with each other, join forces despite those differences, and achieve greatness. That's the only way progress is ever made. That's the only way any of us can become champions. So remember that. With that, I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their evening. This has been Game Day 716. I'm Paul. CJ hit the road. Be good to each other. Love each other.